Honorable Minister for Law and Justice, Ms. Sidhu, Secretary, Government of India, Department of Justice, Honorable Chief Ministers from different states, Chief Justices from different High Courts, my esteemed colleagues from the Supreme Court, senior judicial officers, government officers, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Prime Minister, since 1953, Chief Justices from courts small and big have assembled annually in Delhi under the auspices of the Supreme Court of India, not because they are administratively under the control of the Supreme Court, not because they are worried about their independence or independence of judiciary, not because they want their working conditions or service conditions to be improved or altered, not because they can seek any post-retirement benefits from the government, but because they know, they realize that they are a part of a judicial system that serves the largest democracy in the world. Because they realize that they are the guardians of the Constitution and that they must uphold and enforce the rule of law. They realize that administration of justice in this country, which constitutes 1/5 of the human race on this planet, is a formidable challenge. Because they realize that access to justice continues in this country to be an illusion, with at least 30% of our population below the poverty line. And because they realize that it is necessary for them and for everyone in the high courts and the subordinate judiciary to do whatever is necessary to maintain the credibility of the institution and to make access to justice a reality. This conference, which we concluded yesterday, is also in the same spirit. Several issues were discussed, issues that are often mentioned by people within the system, from outside the system, people in the executive, people in the legislature, both those who admire the system and the institution and those who are critical about it. Several resolutions have been passed. We discussed and resolved that infrastructure in subordinate courts requires to be upgraded. We discussed and resolved that the cadre strength of judges in the subordinate courts needs to be reviewed and revised. We discussed and resolved that vacancies in the high courts ought to be filled up immediately. We discussed and resolved that we need to perhaps restart morning evening courts with the help of retired judicial officers. We discussed and resolved that under trial prisoners who account for 63% of the total population in jails, their cases need to be taken up, especially those who have been in jail and who are facing trials for past 10 years. We discussed and resolved that the implementation of information and communication technology needs to be given a push. We discussed and resolved that we must do whatever is possible to reduce the areas so that there are no cases more than 5 years old in the subordinate courts and the high courts. We resolved to constitute a National Judicial Council for using judicial academies which have come up throughout the country now more effectively for training of judicial officers. We discussed and resolved strengthening of legal aid programs should be more effectively carried out, fast tracking of cases of crime against women, children and differently abled, and marginalized sections of the society should be taken up. We also resolved that strengthening of judicial system dealing with juveniles is important and ought to be taken up. And we discussed ways and means by which we can utilize the grants which the 14th Finance Commission has sanctioned for judiciary in this country. I do not want to go into the details of all these issues and the resolutions that we passed. But I want to point out to all of you that the challenge of administration of justice has become bigger and bigger and is just assuming greater and greater proportions and dimensions. I may indicate by reference to the Supreme Court, because that is also an index of finding out how challenges have multiplied manifold over the years. Honorable President, Honorable Prime Minister, you will know, perhaps you are not directly connected with legal profession. I know you are not a lawyer, but as the Prime Minister of this country, you would have known that we started the Supreme Court in 1950 with 1 plus 7 judges, 8 judges in the Supreme Court. And they were at that time just about 1,215 cases. So it was just about 100 cases per judge when we started our journey. Within one decade, in 1960, we rose the sanctioned strength of the Supreme Court to 1 plus 13, Chief Justice and 13 judges, 14 in all. And the cases rose to 3,247. In 1977, the strength was raised to 1 plus 17, 18 judges in all. And the cases rose to 14,501. In 1986, there was another increase in the Supreme Court judges' strength. It became 1 plus 25, 26 judges. The cases rose to 27,881. By 2009, the strength rose to 1 plus 30, which is the current strength, 31 in all, and the cases rose to 77,151. By 2014, with a strength of 31 judges, we had a backlog of 81,583 cases, which was reduced to the current pendency of 60,260 cases. The institution has increased, and this you will realize when we say that during the past 4 months, from December 3rd when I took over till now, 17,482 cases have been filed in the Supreme Court. If you compare them with the filing and the pendency in 1950, when it was 1,215 cases in all, the filing in 4 months has gone to 17,482. And we have disposed of during this period 16,474 cases. Out of 17,482, 16,474 have been disposed of. This gives an indication of the kind of growth in terms of litigation multiplying in courts. If at the apex level you can have this kind of a phenomenal growth in the litigation, you can understand, you can appreciate what would be the kind of growth at the trial court, the first appellate stage and the second appellate stage. There is no wonder, therefore, that in the high courts today there are 38,68,000 cases pending, as in April 2016. 38 lakhs is a very, very huge number. And the position is complicated, it becomes worse when you see there are 434 vacancies that need to be filled up. Now, what is the way forward is the question. I remember when I was in 5th standard or 6th standard, there used to be a paper of arithmetics. वो पूछते थे सवाल कि अगर एक सड़क 5 आदमी 10 दिन में बनाते हैं, तो वही सड़क अगर 1 दिन में बनानी हो तो कितने आदमी चाहिए? And the answer used to be 50 आदमी चाहिए. 38,68,000 केसेस। को निपटाने के लिए कितने आदमी चाहिए, कितने जज चाहिए? ये बात हम क्यों नहीं समझते? In 1987, the Law Commission of India I'll just read the report. This question can of course be approached from several perspectives. First, we may try to correlate the general increase in population rate with the question of number of judges in all cadres. In regard to political representation in Parliament, the demographic factor has been frozen to the levels of population as in 1971. India has today only 10 judges per million population. Australia, which had roughly 10 million population in 1975, had 577 judges, giving an average of 41 judges per million. Canada, with her 1812 judges with a population of roughly 25 million as of 1973, had the rate of 75 judges per million. England, with 2,504 judges for roughly 50 million people in 1973, had the rate of 50 judges per million. And the United States, with 3 times less population than India, had 25,087 judges as at 1981, giving an average of 107 judges per million of population. This information, filed by the Union of India expert Professor Mark Galanter, has been endorsed by the Union of India. Clearly, the total judge strength of 7,675 is grossly inadequate in India. And the Commission recommends, taking either as a measure, it can safely be estimated on the conservative side that you would need a minimum increase in the judge strength from present 7,675 to 40,357, increasing the ratio of judges per million of population from 10 to 50. In 1987, the Law Commission, which is the Government of India Law Commission, not a private body, recommends 40,000 judges in the country. Then comes, of course, inaction on the part of the governments. The increase does not take place. So the Supreme Court on judicial side takes up this issue. In All India Judges Association case in 2002, 15 years later, the court says, Mr. F.S. Nariman has drawn our attention to yet another important aspect with regard to dispensation of justice, namely the huge backlog of undecided cases. One of the reasons which has been indicated even in the 120th Law Commission report, which I just now read, was the inadequate strength of judges compared to the population of the country. Even the Standing Committee of the Parliament, headed by Shri Pranab Mukherjee, in its 85th report submitted in February 2002 to the Parliament, has recommended that there should be an increase in the number of judges. The said committee has noted the judge population ratio in different countries and has adversely commented on the judge population ratio of 10 judges per million of people in India. The report recommends the acceptance, in the first instance, of increasing the judges' strength to 50 judges per 10 lakh people as recommended by the 120th Law Commission report. And the court said, we are of the opinion that time has now come for protecting one of the pillars of the Constitution, namely the judicial system, by directing increase in the first instance in the judge strength ratio from existing 10.5 or 13 per 10 lakh people to 50 judges per 10 lakh people. And the court directed that you increase the judge strength to 50, which would mean around 40,000 judges in the country. But nothing moves. The Chief Justice of India, Justice Altmas Kabir, writes a letter on 21st February